Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another Backstage Pass event by Arctiq. And this time we're here with our friends from Google. So we're excited about that for sure. And going to show some cool demos. Like I always say, we're not going to kill anyone with PowerPoint. Lots of real content, lots of real demos. Everything may not work perfect, but we re-roll the dice. We've been through these before. I think we've got all our passwords saved this time, right, Daniyal? Shout out to my buddy Shay. We always rib him about that inside joke. Anyway, looking forward to this one. Team's been working hard on some cool content. This one's focused on KF. KF is recently announced, so if you don't know what it is, you will in a little bit. And I'm going to go through some different use cases and things like that. Tee up the deck here. Like I said, not a lot of slides, a whole lot of content is the plan, our promise. Obviously, we'll take some questions and comments in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye out for that. I'm sure my team is watching things on the back end to tell me if I miss any questions. But a lot of content today. We're hoping to wrap up in about an hour and a half. And we will record this. So any of your colleagues or people you want to see, we will get it out in the next day or so. So that's the plan. So without further ado, let's get into things. All right. Not as always. I guess I used to say as always, the team started hosting different Backstage Passes, which is really cool. So I'm your host, Kyle Bassett today. Quick intro on Arctiq we're going to talk about KF. We're going to talk about a little tool we've been building called Turn. And then I'll do a quick intro of the team. We got two, three demos kind of focused to show you today. We'll take some QA, and we have a special guest as always. We're just waiting for him to show up backstage, and then we'll work him into the agenda. Obviously, we're live on YouTube, so paste the link to your friends, tweet about it. Get the word out. There's still time to come in and check out all this great content. And as my kids always say, like and subscribe for further content. Shout out to our poster guy, Johnny, who has been killing the posters. So I wanted to show those off. People really like these, so we're going to keep them going. Can't wait to get back into our meetup space so we can plaster the walls in posters now that we got a good arsenal of posters. So keep an eye out. There's going to be more of these. We're going to definitely extend this event. This is just a little bit of a taste to show you what's possible. We're definitely not going to scratch every use case, but we're going to start to get the word out, and then we're going to keep working on this stuff. So I am lucky to have today our guest, Micah from Google, who's been spearheading a lot of the KF work with his awesome team. Obviously, Daniyal's a veteran on the Backstage Pass route. Daniyal's been grinding away, building really cool stuff. I'm sure he's had some late nights, but he's also had some pretty big accomplishments. So I can't wait to show you that. And Rohit is our special guest today. So he'll be coming on a bit later and get some questions ready for him. He always likes getting put in the spot from what I hear. Arctiq, I think if you're here, you know who we are. If you're not, we're focused on automation, DevOps, kind of all that Kubernetes space. We're a Google Premier partner, and we've been very lucky to be a design partner for Anthos. So if you look at top left, this is where we started a little over 2 years ago, helping GK on-prem and getting that to market. We got heavily into service mesh and config management, and we're doing a lot of migration tooling. And it's been a fun ride. We get to work closely with Google PMs and engineering teams to help shape some of these products and then bring them to market and work with customers to make them sing. That's the plan, and that's what we focus on. I just want to kind of tee up the Anthos building blocks. Like I said, there's only a couple slides here, but everything is kind of focused on the open source space, right? So the foundations are built in open source, and then Google's obviously productizing some of these offerings to make your life easier and offer things as services and integrations. At the very bottom, it's all about Kubernetes these days, right? It's like the de facto orchestrator and scheduler for containers. So where that contrasts into what we talk about is GKE. That's the kind of matching offering. Up the stack, you're going to see us talk about Istio and service operations and service mesh. That's going to relate to Anthos service mesh when you look at cloud offerings and productized. At the top, it's Knative, the open source project that lots of great companies are contributing to. Today, we're going to demo some of the Cloud Run capabilities. So Cloud Run integrates with Knative, and that space I like to talk about as developer experience. Like, developers have got a voice now, or hurrah. So tools are important. They demand certain things. They're pushing the business forward. And I would say the KF toolkit's going to fit into that developer experience. And then you're going to see a lot of cool integrations, and then being able to run things on Kubernetes, GKE, or being able to have a little bit more closer to a serverless experience and run things in Cloud Run. So Daniel's been cooking up some stuff. I think that idea came up maybe 4 days ago, and I kind of said, I don't know if we should do that. And then I think the next day it was already done. So early day stuff, but it all just goes to show this stuff all kind of works out of the box. A lot of work goes into it behind the scenes. Contrasting to this is, like, we're looking at a platform approach with all these things. So again, bottom to top is your Kubernetes layer. Obviously, we're very multi-cloud, multi-cluster management focused. Infrastructure abstracting becomes a really important thing. We want to, write once, run anywhere. This whole declarative approach to things is something we really got behind. So you're going to hear us, preach GitOps a lot. Codify everything, automate everything, drive everything through Git and release management strategies and things like that. And then at the top of the cake is developer experience. And then I really think CI and CD have been broken into two kind of paradigms, which is a good thing. I think we were trying to solve all this in one for years. And the reality is, you're building artifacts, you're going to manage them, and then you're going to figure out how to get them out the door and deploy them with velocity. So the goal is, write code, commit, build, deploy, run. Let's do it all over again. Let's do it fast and reliably, and insert security and all those good things into the game. Just a little overlay on kind of Arctiq's approach. Everything we do is kind of smaller projects with big wins quick. We don't want to have these long 6-month projects to figure out if you get value. So this is our money slide, like we'll get you a scooter, and eventually we'll get you a car if you want one. Maybe you're happy with a motorcycle. And I think the piece that we're starting to focus on a lot more is where the opportunity is. So the largest opportunity is around application modernization these days. Clusters are, they're kind of table stakes. Building Kubernetes environments, standing up environments is not the differentiating factor anymore. It's how do we get your applications into these environments, and that goes both for legacy apps and greenfield builds. So there's different techniques to handle those things, obviously. So KF is GA. Hooray! A couple days ago went GA. Team's been working on this for a while. We've been happy to be able to contribute to the testing and the debating on what needs to go where, and getting it in front of customers and testing the real workloads. We always have this joke of all the test apps we test work flawlessly. So we're excited to get into environments where different use cases have been applied, and there's different ways to do things, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and figure them out with the Google team. One thing people keep asking me is KF a replacement for CF? And no, it's not. It's not a clone. It's really a bridge to help you migrate your Cloud Foundry infrastructure and applications over to Kubernetes. And the big thing is people don't have time to redevelop applications, or maybe they're on a journey and a quick migration gets them halfway there, and then they have some time to kind of modernize as they go. Obviously, we're going to talk about Anthos because it's the real platform play and the integration story with KF and some of these other tools. So, that's that consistent experience we're trying to push forward. Obviously, we're going to support on-prem, other clouds. So that's a big differentiator in the Anthos space is we'll meet you where you're kind of at is the motto. ACM, Anthos Config Management, is a foundational component to everything we're doing. So this is this GitOps approach to doing things. And a lot of the tooling that Daniel's going to show you is how we've built a lot of scaffolding to be able to stand up the ACM repos and keep you out of the YAML and help you kind of have a workflow to drive this consistency. Obviously, it helps us manage at scale across multi-clouds, but automate all the things is the real focus. And then we've got a sneak peek of some tooling we've been building, code name Turn. Turn's a migration bird up in the Arctic, so felt fitting. And this is your migration story and how you build pipelines into this and how you migrate apps at scale. We're leveraging KF very heavily to do it for the Cloud Foundry. We're leveraging good projects and open source projects like Tecton pipelines and for the CI/CD aspect. So excited to show you some of that stuff. The other thing we're working pretty hard on is building offerings for customers. So we find a lot of customers have similar problems. So rather than everything being, hire a consultant, bring a team in to kind of figure it out, we've figured a lot of this stuff out. So we want to be able to offer product offerings around this. So productizing some of our services and tools. So they break into about 6 pillars today, and you'll probably see a few more get added over the time. So we're going to get into it. I promised I'd be quick, 10 minutes. I think I hit my goal. So let's get to the fun part. And let's talk about migrating Cloud Foundry workloads with KF to Anthos. So Micah, I'm going to throw it over to you, and let's get into the fun part.
All right, great. Thank you, Kyle. It's a pleasure to join the Arctiq team for this event, and we want to give you kind of a sneak peek or taster of KF. This isn't going to cover all the different use cases. We're just kind of give you the introduction so that you understand, like, what is this thing. So to start off, you probably want to know what are some of the key comparisons that you might make with Cloud Foundry and KF. So as Kyle mentioned at the outset, it's not a clone of KF, but we're trying to give you an opportunity to break a migration story into the granularity that makes sense for you. A lot of customers are eager to standardize on Kubernetes because that allows them to have the flexibility to run lots of different workloads. And it enables those workloads to be on-prem, on multi-cloud, or just on GKE if they want to. Lots of different ways that they can manage things and still have a central control plane through Anthos in those scenarios. So KF is really opinionated, but its opinions really revolve around Kubernetes. It's focused on giving you that access to Kubernetes without disrupting the developer workflows. And that's how we give the two-part migration journey. So from a developer or app operator perspective, these commands listed here should look very familiar. It's just changing from CF to KF. That's kind of the pattern that you'll see through KF. It's a thin wrapper around a Kubernetes cluster to make it very accessible from that perspective. But the folks who care about the platform will be happy that they can also run native Kubernetes commands, take advantage of the rich ecosystem that is emerging around Kubernetes. Lots of tools for policy and compliance, creating guardrails. As Kyle mentioned, GitOps is a really big part of our story around Kubernetes. Just really not reinventing the wheel. So KF is keeping the parts of Cloud Foundry that developers really care about, but they didn't. The whole point of Cloud Foundry was that developers didn't have to think about the back end. What's the infrastructure this is running on? It's still that same concept. Here's my code, make it run for me. The difference is that the platform teams can optimize their environment around Kubernetes and take advantage of the economies of scale that affords. I want to point out that KF is it's a tool that is available to all Google customers for use on any Google managed clusters. So if it's on GKE or an Anthos attached cluster, that all works fine. Anthos is not a requirement. You could just use GKE if you want to. So just to kind of reiterate the different perspectives that you can have on the same cluster, from a developer perspective, folks that are used to running, say, a CF push command, they'll still feel the same experience. They should see little to no difference for how they do their day-to-day. But the folks who had been managing Bosch, for example, on the back end, they get to see the benefits around using Kubernetes. They still have access to those same KF commands, but they can always break the glass and go deeper and do more things with kubectl commands. So depending on which other tools from the ecosystem are being employed, such as maybe Anthos config management, there may be more opportunities for the platform teams and operator teams to get more benefits and make their jobs easier. We want to help operators be able to take advantage of Kubernetes and gradually introduce them to these concepts. And generally speaking, customers don't want all that change at once. And so we're helping you decide how much change is right for you. And there isn't like a one-size-fits-all approach to migration stories. So KF is one of our tools in the toolbox to figure out for your apps and your workflows what is the right way to do it. We think of kind of the primary benefits really around developers. Keeping that CF-like developer workflow is really top of mind for us. We work very hard to make that transparent for them. So things like supporting build packs and service brokers are really important for the developer experience. And when we get into our demo, you'll see all that in action, as well as the variety of commands that are commonly used from a CF perspective. And again, we can run this on any of the Google Kubernetes clusters. We're not doing a big marketing presentation or anything. This is just kind of an introduction. We do want to give you a demonstration. And before I get into the demo, I want to spend just a moment walking you through. On the next slide, I actually have the steps I've already completed, just so you can get a little sense of what's already been done. So all we've done is we've set up a GKE cluster, put KF on it. We've enabled a mini broker. And then I've already cloned the Spring Music GitHub repository, which is kind of a good sample app representative of many customers' Cloud Foundry apps. We've created a space. We've targeted that space, and I have already pushed the app. Finally, I have created a couple of backing services options, and we're going to work with Redis this time. So this is the state of things as we move into the demo. So now I'm going to share my terminal window.
Cool. And one of the things I liked there, Micah, was just the contrast between, being opinionated with the stack and helping people go fast and have that developer experience, but you can still go underneath the covers and work at the Kubernetes level and use those kubectl commands and native kind of Kubernetes stuff to take things to the next level if you want to, once you're past kind of like the starter kit version.
That's a great point. I appreciate that.
Cool.
Okay, so we're going to do like a quick there's nothing up our sleeves check.
We'll just do a listing of our apps so you can see that we have an app already running. I like to have my logs going at the same time in a different tab so I can see the state of things in case I need to bounce an app. So we have the app running right now. I'm going to grab this URL so we can go see the state of the app. Great. So it looks like the default Spring Music app. No profiles or services. That's good. Let's go over here and we'll list the services. You can see that we have a couple of different brokered services, MySQL and Redis. We will go ahead and confirm that neither of them are bound. Okay. So now one other test we can do is VCAP services. And we get an empty set, so we know that there are no environment variables being injected into our app. So let's go ahead and bind Redis. Okay, and it's telling us that we need to bounce the app. Do that. Watch the logs to know when it has come back online. There we go, shut down. And back up. All right, so now we have switched our bindings. Let's go back to our web page. We're going to refresh. Now we have a different backing service. We can see that Redis and the Spring Music Redis DB service have been attached, and that's why we have all this different data in here. Let's go back and just look at some kubectl commands that we can use to compare. KF is just wrapping around Kubernetes, providing a lot of conveniences, so you can still get the Cloud Foundry experience, but still have all the power of Kubernetes underneath. So we could do cluster service brokers will tell us from the Kubernetes perspective what's running for our broker service. We had, as we said, activated the mini broker. And we can also get spaces this way, or we can get spaces via KF, and we'll see the same output. We can also do kubectl get deployments. And here we can see our app running. So it's a nice and boring demo. We were able to easily bind Redis, switch that backing service. We could switch it to multiple different backing services, bouncing the app in between if we want to. But that is our demo.
Cool.
Jump back over to the application or to the terminal window. We'll just cover a few more things to highlight not only that the service was active, but like how does this look like from the KF perspective? So now when we look at the VCAP services, we see all the environment variables were injected for us. That's how that just automatically works as expected. But I think what's really interesting is looking at how kubectl can actually be used as well. So what we did earlier, we did a kf apps command, and that shows us just a traditional view of what apps are running on there. But we can also do this command from kubectl, and it looks exactly the same, but we're actually directly interacting with the Kubernetes API in this case. So this kind of demonstrates how KF is giving you a lot of convenience so that you don't get directly exposed to the Kubernetes side of things if you don't want to. All of that power of kubectl commands are available to you. So for example, we can see that we have our mini broker configured and activated. Cases, and we can see the same thing this side. So it is a pretty boring demo, which is a good thing. This will just give you an idea of how we're focused on protecting that developer experience, but also letting folks who care about the Kubernetes side of things still have access to all the power of Kubernetes and allow you to standardize on Kubernetes as a platform without taking all the change at once.
Cool. That was great. Maybe talk just a second about, we saw spaces there. Obviously, that's a Cloud Foundry term, orgs and spaces. Do you want to just talk quickly about how that relates over to people that know Kubernetes? They're probably thinking, is that the same as namespaces? How does that kind of boundary work, and how do you contrast that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So namespaces is what we're mapping to. We're working within a namespace, but what we do with a KF space is it's actually a super powered space. It's more similar to a Cloud Foundry organization. Think of it as flattening orgs and spaces that would probably be a more accurate representation of what a KF space is. And then we just use the Kubernetes namespaces to manage that.
Cool. Yeah, and I've seen people do different things with that, like use a space for an application team, a space for maybe a dev versus QA. I generally see people separate non-prod and prod clusters, but you can get pretty creative inside the namespacing. And you can attach quotas. You can kind of manipulate a lot of stuff that's required inside a large enterprise. And obviously, the nice part about this is if you use ACM and Anthos config management, you can wrangle that at scale. So when you build a cluster, you can apply all those policies. You're not having to run scripts or jump on clusters and kind of deal with that after the fact. So cool. Thanks, Micah, for the sneak peek. Go ahead if you had another point.
Oh, I'm just going to share, like, what you were just saying is a really good articulation of how we're not reinventing the wheels. There's a bunch of things that already exist in Kubernetes. So rather than just simply trying to re-implement things that were already there, it's we have an opinion of mapping those things to what's already the best practice on Kubernetes, and just trying to preserve only the developer side.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, keeping that developer experience the same and not having to rewrite these apps just to be able to take advantage of something like GKE or Kubernetes is obviously pretty critical. Awesome. So that is a little taste. To keep an eye out for a lot more, I would say. Been talking about what's coming down the pipe and stuff the engineering teams are working on is pretty exciting. So, all right, Daniyal, are you ready to rock? You ready to rock and roll? All right, so
ready
I'm
to
gonna
go.
let you do the screen sharing thing here, and let's get on with it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my name is Daniyal. I'm a consultant in Arctiq, working on a lot of cool stuff, mainly around application modernization, CI/CD pipelines, and just helping my customers release software faster. And I have a big focus on Kubernetes as well, and past experience in OpenShift platforms, things like that as well. So I'm going to be talking about migrating applications at scale. So we saw a sneak peek of what KF does, but how do we scale that out, right? Like, I have 100 applications in my Cloud Foundry instance. How do I migrate them onto Anthos and GKE? So we've been working on some tooling around how do we tackle this problem. So essentially, when you're going from Cloud Foundry to KF, it's not only KF that you're getting the entire GCP ecosystem with it, right? So things like Cloud Run, Anthos config management, service mesh, and a whole variety of GCP APIs and applications are at your disposal. So we thought about this problem from that perspective. How do we leverage some of the other ecosystem tooling around KF as well? So it's one thing that, that a person would think first would be to, migrate your applications manually. So just hand bomb all your KF push one by one, and then go with that. We thought about a different approach. So we came up with, how do we automate this process? We thought about GitOps as like the underlying workhorse for this workflow. So because KF right now works on Anthos and GKE, so we leverage Anthos config management for the automation process. So having everything as code, all your migrations as code, sitting in your Git repository to have a consistent workflow around all your clusters. So imagine this at scale, you have 10 organizations in Cloud Foundry right now. You want to translate that onto 10 Kubernetes clusters. How do you manage that and make sure it's consistent across all your platforms and clusters? So we went with ACM and Policy Controller to have the underlying platform with that.
Yeah, and Daniyal, I think that's I just wanted to add, I think that's a important concept, right? Like we jump in, obviously the first thing you're going to do is try to replicate something, make it work manually. But I know when we started talking to customers early, we'd show them, here's a way to do it. Let's show you the tooling. Let's show you how to do it. And they're like, okay, like the developer experience doesn't change. And then the next question was, okay, well, how fast can you do these? And you're thinking, okay, well, we're talking 20, 30, and sometimes we're talking thousands. Like sometimes there's thousands of applications that need to get replatformed for business reasons, technology reasons, end of life reasons. So that's where we really started saying, okay, this needs to be a pipeline of some kind. We need to be able to rinse and repeat these things. So that's where a lot of this thinking came from.
Exactly. And yeah, listen to Morpheus. You don't have to do all this manually, right? Like one by one. So we've tried to solve this problem by CI/CD pipelines and just essentially take your applications, put it in a UI, and then have it migrate. And then you wake up in the morning and your applications are migrated. So that's the experience we're going for. So let me get into it. So we're calling it Turn. This is the first time we're talking about it as well. This was the fastest name pick we've done ever on a product and a project. And what it's focused around is having everything as code. So we're focusing on GitOps and having your migrations living as code in your Git repository as well. We're going to be using Google KF for builds. The Google KF team has done a great job with mimicking that behavior for build packs and building your container images. So we're using that workflow. And also KF comes with, when you install KF in a cluster, it comes with Tekton as well. So we're leveraging the same Tekton instance for pipelines, for deploying your applications, building them, and then deploying them with Anthos config management as well.
Yeah, and Daniel, the next slide, I think I wanted to talk about a couple different like focus areas. So today we're focusing obviously on the Cloud Foundry piece. Our vision is to get, you know, kind of everything over to Kubernetes and also stuff that's already on Kubernetes. So getting it to this common platform approach and being able to leverage the Anthos service. So the Cloud Foundry piece was a really hard problem to solve, but with KF, it's not really hard anymore. We can extend it, and it's really gives us a lot of flexibility. Now, something like OpenShift is already Docker images. There's already manifest and YAML. Now, that's going to be kind of a parsing exercise and a redoing the ingress and sometimes unwinding the CI/CD. So if they source the image heavily. We also see a lot of customers that are just using Kubernetes, like I refer to it as like XKS, so EKS, AKS, Rancher. A lot of people have run open source for a while and they've hit scale and they're kind of saying, wow, this is really hard to manage these, especially across different distributions and things like that. And then the other piece you'll see us talk a lot about is VMs to containers. There's a lot going on in the space around Migrate for Anthos. And our opinion is like, let's pipeline everything. Let's input a source destination type kind of concept, and let's have it come out the other end. And let's give you a way to update it as well. It's one thing to do a migration, but what if you want to continue to kind of reinvent your apps and have this developer experience? So Daniel's going to show that today too, because it's one thing to migrate, but what's the next day look like if I need to make a code change kind of thing. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yep, thanks. So just to set the stage for the demo, some of the components that I'm going to be using today will be, the biggest one will be Anthos. So I have two clusters here. So one is a KF cluster, so which I'm going to be calling a processing cluster. This cluster is going to be used for CI. So we're going to be building our container images and our application images in this cluster. And then I have an application cluster, so which is going to be the end destination, right? So that could be your dev cluster, prod cluster. Depending on your workflow, you can customize it according to your liking. I also have ACM, as I mentioned before as well. So Anthos config management will be running on the application clusters just to make sure that consistent control plane and the configurations is across all my clusters. So what the workflow looks like today is essentially, first I did was stand up Anthos, as I discussed before. We're going to bootstrap our environment to install the necessary components like KF, Turn, all the pipelines, tasks, Tekton tasks, and things like that. And then once that is deployed, we're going to assess the code, right? So we were taking an application, a candidate application that's ready for migration. We're going to assess the code if it's a right fit for this migration, right? So we want to make sure that it's mimicking the same behavior for CF push to KF push, and it works on that sense as well. And then we're going to plug in the application into our Turn UI. Once that is done, it's going to trigger a Tekton pipeline. So I'm going to end this here and get into the demo, and then I can return on what happens after.
All right.
So essentially, yeah, so this is the UI for Turn. Shout out to Tim and Ali from our team. They did a great job with the UI. So essentially, we have a UI where we can plug in our application repos, right? So the applications that I have today, which I will quickly talk about, I have one running in a Cloud Foundry cluster as well. So I have just a SaaS instance running on IBM Cloud. The first one that I'm going to be going over will be Arctiq store. So you can take a look at the URL here, go to the BlueMix URL, open this guy up. And we can see it's an Arctiq store. We're selling all our stickers and our merch. That you can see Kyle wearing one as well with the hat. And you can add it to a basket, and the basket gets updated. So it's just simple app with a backend as well. So
where are you running this today, Daniyal? Oh, that's in Bluemix, right? You're using on their Cloud Foundry service? Cool.
That's right, yeah. So this is running on Cloud Foundry. I have the application repo in my GitHub repository as well. So you can see that the application repo requires me to do a Gradle build and then do a CF push, right? So these are the steps.
Just plus on that a little bit, Daniyal, just for old eyes. Thanks, man. Perfect.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wearing 4. I have contacts in, so.
Nice.
So you just need to do a Gradle build and then a CF push, right? So these are the things that we were looking for. Like, what do we need to do to run the application, right? So let's take the URL for this application and plug it into our Turn UI. So I'm going to come in here, sign in with GitHub, and I'm going to pass in my PAT, my personal access token, and pull my application repos for this migration. So I'm going to submit this, and we can see it's pulling the repos that I have access to. So once this is complete, I will get an entire list of all the applications that I have access to and that I can import for this migration. So that is done. Click Discover. And you can see we have a simple form here, right? So this is the first iteration. This is the first MVP of this UI. We will be adding different functionalities around selecting the build type, the build commands, the KF commands, and things like that. So, but this is just to show you a sneak peek of what's coming. So I'm going to come in, pick my application name, pick my application repo, which is the Arctiq store here. I'm going to select Gradle as the build type. I'm going to select my ACM repo. And then I'm going to do my domains as well. So where do I want my application to work on? What's the endpoint? And the KF cluster domain as well, which is running on the cluster itself. And I'm going to hit submit here.
And you want to touch on, when you hit submit, do you want to, or hold off maybe, do you want to touch on just the ACM repo part? So the kind of scaffolding we're taking care of there to go and get all that configuration together. And then obviously the nice part about that is the next set of clusters you build and point them at that set of repo. You can obviously just scale this out. And you mentioned Policy Manager. Maybe just touch on the things you can do with Policy Manager from an ACM perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was going to come to ACM right after I hit submit.
Cool.
So
yeah.
So let me just do this because like I just want to show the workflow play first. So let me just hit submit here. And then, so what's going on in the back end now is we're laying down the necessary Tekton objects that we need for the migration pipeline to function. So things like event listeners, Tekton tasks, and things like that will be laid down. So we can see all of my trigger templates, virtual services, and the GitHub webhook has been deployed for my application. So now I just have the Tekton dashboard here as well, just to show you what's going on. We can see immediately 3 seconds ago, once I hit submit, a pipeline just got kicked off. Now what this is doing in the back end, it's cloning my repo, building my container image with KF and Gradle, doing the source build, building the jar file and the war files, whatever is necessary, and then deploying and building the container image with KF. And what that looks like is, if I can just go into the previous one that I was playing with last night. As you can see, we're fetching the repo, that's application repo, then we're doing a Gradle build, we're doing a KF build, fetching the ACM repository, and then we're deploying with ACM, right? So let's talk a little bit about ACM now and what that looks like. So I'm gonna go in here now, go to my ACM repository here. So for those of you that are not familiar with ACM, essentially I have an application, I have a repository where I can control my configurations on my clusters from just one single source of truth. So imagine this repository as the state of all of my clusters, right? So I'm going to go into config management here. You can see I have a folder for cluster, namespaces, and then system. I'm going to click on namespaces here. And you can see I already have 2 namespaces here. So one is Spring Music, which was the application that Micah showed you. And then I have weather as well. And what that looks like on the terminal is if I come in here, do a kubectl get namespace, you would see I have the same namespaces that I'm showing you there as well. Now, what happens if me as a user, I go and accidentally try to mess around with some of the things around like the namespaces? Let's try to delete this namespace here. So Spring Music, let's delete this and see what happens. So this is going to go against what the state of the cluster is in Git. Once this finishes, come on.
Get that feeling I have when I'm always not doing live demos on stage of a lot of people, and I'm like, okay, this took like half a second before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was pretty quick last time I did this. So there you go. So the namespaces got deleted. Now let's see if the namespaces actually got deleted or not. So you can see it by me doing this action, it got deleted, and now 5 seconds ago, it came back, right? So it's always going to check whatever is in the cluster at all times, right? And we have the same thing for the weather namespace as well. This is another application that I'm running. And then I also have policy controller as well, which is existing in Gatekeeper system here. So that handles all your security policies, making sure that you can have guardrails around your application, where the source is coming from, where the image is coming from, and things like that. So let's go back to the Tecton dashboard. And we can see that now on this takes about, by the way, around like 10-ish minutes. So I'm not going to wait for this to finish. I'm just going to pick on an old one that I did here. So we can see that we fetched the repo, did a Gradle build, KF build, and then we fetched the ACM repository, and then we exported all of our manifests that are built with KF onto ACM. And what that looks like in the workflow is the same thing as well that I'm showing you there. So we're cloning the source repo, building the image, pushing it with KF, and then exporting and committing all of our artifacts into the ACM repository. So once this is done, so you can imagine this, once I started the pipeline here, we're putting the turkey in the oven. What comes out on the other side? We want a cooked turkey. So what that looks like now is if I go to my ACM repository and check out pull requests, I can see I have a pull request open here from the pipeline that I was showing you before, that has all of my artifacts already in place. So we can take a look at files changed. We can see our deployment. And we can see where the image is coming from. This is all built by KF from my processing cluster. We have our namespace. We have our service account, and we have our service, and then the virtual service for Ingress as well. So you can see it picked up the domain that I passed in the UI. I'm going to come in here, merge this pull request. And now what happens when I merge that pull request is I should get a new namespace by the name of Arctiq store immediately once it picks up the change and reconciles. So you can see 2 seconds ago, I have Arctiq store here. Now if I go to the ACM repo here, go to config management, go to namespaces, you would see Arctiq store, Spring Music, and weather exists there as well. So you can see that's in place. Let's take a look at the pods here and see what's going on. You can see that our pod is coming up, 1 out of 2. So we also have the SEO sidecar running as well for service mesh components and for Ingress as well. So my application is up now. I can take a look at my virtual service. Let's go to this guy here. So this is my Bluemix instance. And now this is my Anthos instance. So you can see the same application. We went from CF all the way to Anthos in a matter of like 10 to 15 minutes.
Daniel, there's a big difference there though. I don't know if you noticed.
What's the difference?
It's so much faster over on the platform.
Yeah, so yesterday for some reason, when I was deploying the CF app, it takes like 5 minutes for the app to come up, and it was strange. But yeah, like it's super fast. Like I did this in like 10, 15 minutes for the first time. Now, when we developed the tool, we were testing it with like different apps as well, and like the experience was seamless with the KF build in the backend. So that worked out well.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I can take my credit card off the Bluemix site now.
Yeah, I plan to do that. All right, so this is essentially just, so now what we're thinking for the next iteration of Turn is to essentially give you the ability to add multiple repositories. Right now you saw me add one repo. What we're thinking ahead is have like an array of repos where you can plug in and go from there, right? Which would make things a lot more simpler. So this was, a scenario where we want to come from an application that exists on CF and then go to Anthos. Now, what happens post-migration, right? Like we don't want you to leave you alone with the migrated application, because like that just doesn't solve the problem. We need to think about the day two and like what the developer experience is once your application is migrated.
I guess though, if the developer is used to just CF push and they can switch over to KF push, then they can continue to develop and just replace C with K. Obviously, we want to get them to a full pipeline and be able to do this from GitOps. But is that a fair use case if someone wants to kind of stop here?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. So in terms of going from like mimicking that behavior for CF to KF, that will work. This is more around, I would say, how do you take it to the next level? If you want to migrate to Kubernetes, how do we go and leverage some of the tooling that's available in the Anthos ecosystem? So just having like a symlink to C to K will work as well. Yeah. So what we're thinking now is essentially, let's move away from like running CF push and bring our application up. Let's focus more on Git and just pushing code and having the backend services and your pipelines do all the heavy lifting. So we're thinking the approach we're taking is Git push is the new CF push, right? So that's what we want to focus on. So once your application is migrated now, all I need to do is go and do a Git push. And in the backend, everything should be taken care of automatically. So this is the workflow that I have in a diagram here, right? So essentially, me as a developer, I need to go into my source repository, merge whatever code I want. In the backend, Tekton is going to do my build, my testing. We can add on whatever we want, extract all my artifacts, and then commit that to an ACM repository here, right? So, and we have all our Anthos clusters here as well, which are the processing clusters and the container build and the registries as well. Now, all these are Lego blocks, I would say. We can replace the Tekton component with something like GitLab CI, Jenkins, whatever customers are using. We can also add unit testing here as well, SonarQube, and we can also integrate it with their registry as well. So wherever you can store a container, we can use that. So what the workflow will be in terms of post-migration will be, developer checks in the code. We want to trigger the Tekton pipeline as we did before, clone the source repository, build our jar files, do a KF build, and then export all our artifacts and our images into ACM, right? So let's see that in action. I have another application here running called Weather CF. So this is in my Cloud Foundry instance. So I'm going to take a look at the Bluemix URL here, weather-cf. Let's go on this guy here. And we can see it's a simple front end, which tells you the weather. And it says it's 17 degrees in Toronto today, which is a nice day today. So let's take this application and see how that behaves now. Now, in my application cluster, I already have this application migrated. So you can see all the pods are up here. My virtual service is up as well. I can go to my application here, and we can see it's the same application that's running in CF, and the same way it's running in Anthos as well. And the Tekton dashboard, I can show you the pipeline that I used yesterday. So here we can see it's fetching the repository, doing a KF build, fetching the ACM repo, and doing an Anthos export. And the application repository, what that looks like is just a simple CF push. So you can see now, I did not do any sort of builds before, a Maven build or a Gerdau build or anything like that. I just did a KF build, right? So a KF push will take care of all your artifact generation, artifact builds, and things like that, mimicking the same behavior that you would do normally in a CF push environment as well. So let's go to this repository here for weather. And you can see I have a pull request already open here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the weather app, it's showing you the temperature in Celsius. We're going to convert it into imperial. So it's for our friends in the States here. We're going to change this. I'm going to change the background image as well. And we're going to just change it from metric to imperial and to Fahrenheit. So let's go in and merge this pull request. Confirm this merge. So once this is merged, on the Tekton dashboard, you would see automatically a new pipeline got triggered again, right? So it's the same workflow that we're talking about before. As you don't need to worry about running CF, running KF, or anything like that. You just focus on building code and focus on that developer experience that we're talking about. So once this is done, it will build my application, push it, and have it ready as a pull request in the ACM repository. And once again, this takes about 5 to 7 minutes to complete. I'm going to go in to my ACM repository and take a look at pull requests. And you can see that I have a pull request open here for weather. And now, thing to notice here from before, from Arctiq store to weather app, is now I don't have all of my deployments and my namespaces and all my Kubernetes artifacts being deployed again. The only thing I'm changing now is the image ID. So that's the key here, right? So I'm only changing what needs to be changed, and I'm not focusing on redeploying the entire stack again.
What I like about that, Daniyal, is it's the container image is the new artifact. I had this talk I did a long time ago, and I think it changed my mind, right? I think in the early days when I saw all this happen, I had this opinion that you just build in every environment from scratch, and you always get a fresh build, deploy, you've automated it, who cares? What I learned really quickly was the way that processes work in most enterprise customers is, let's think about the WAR file and the jar file. Mm-hmm. And people used to build that, they put it into Artifactory or something. And the process is, well, we test that in dev, and then we move the exact same artifact through the environments. We solve separations for duty. You can add an MD5 check in your pipeline. And what I kind of became a believer in is, why fight the process? The process has already been defined. We can automate these things. We can still treat the image like an artifact. And the reality is, you want to have a sign-off point where you say, okay, this image is baked and ready to go. We don't want it to change. And the other thing it reinforces is, you can never make a change to a production environment without going through a lower environment and then pushing these artifacts through. So it was an enlightening moment for me when I was trying to say to someone, well, we'll just change the process of release management to a bank. And they kind of chuckled and said, mm-hmm. How about we just move the artifact through the process? And I think that's a great point here, is you could just do an image tag or something like that, and then that kicks off all the workflow. So I think that's really powerful as far as like change goes. Change is hard, right? So we got to make it easy for people.
Yeah, exactly. And we want to make sure the same image that that's in our lower environments is in production as well, right? So this all ensures that you have the same image going through each environment. Now you can retag these images to have something simpler. This is like the default image name that I'm getting from KF, but that can be built in as well. So I'm going to come in here, merge this pull request. And now on the Anthos config management side, once this change is reconciled, we can see that the new instance of our application should be coming up. So what's this doing in the backend? Essentially just picked up that change for the image, and now it's bringing up that new pod. Now you can see, this is the power of Kubernetes. We're waiting for the new application, new instance to come up before we kill the old one. So now we are 2 out of 2 ready on the new one. And now we're killing and terminating the old one here. And you can see 16 seconds ago versus 15 hours ago.
Sweet. And then obviously we can scale these up too, right? I mean, I don't want to ruin the next demo, but if you wanted to have like a manual scaling event here, you could certainly do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish quickly. That's terminating. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to exit these and just go to my weather app now and take a look at what's happening here. So you can see now that the change that I had for the background image, that's been done. And now let's get the temperature for Toronto here. And we can see now it's changed to Fahrenheit. So all of that change in going from, post-migration, you migrate your application to Anthos, did a git push, and you saw your application come from one instance onto another. I'm going to check the weather in San Francisco as well, because I missed the city.
Yeah, it's always safe. It's always safe to do San Francisco. We don't feel so bad, but LA or Sunnyvale usually kind of makes us a little depressed this time of year.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's the post-migration workflows that we've been working on. Now let's talk a little bit more about the GCP ecosystem as well, and what you get when you migrate to GCP and Anthos, and what other goodies that we can leverage. So the one I'm going to be talking about today is going to be Cloud Run for Anthos. So now you can imagine that we have these images built with KF. What do we do with them, right? You have the ability to run containers anywhere. You can run them on Anthos for AWS, Anthos for on-prem, Azure, which is coming up soon as well, and bare metal as well. So what Cloud Run ensures is you can run your Docker containers in a standard way that you would do in a Kubernetes environment. You can scale it to 0, so you have the ability for those burstable workloads to be onboarded onto Cloud Run for Anthos. And then you have the functionality for the GCP dashboard and built-in monitoring and logging. And then finally, run anywhere with Anthos, as I said before. So the workflow that I'm going to be using is essentially using KF for the build and then Cloud Run for the deploy, right? So now we have the images built for this application. What else can I use to deploy these workloads? And the demo that I'm going to be using today will be around traffic management and revisions, and how can I bring up one application and then bring up another and traffic split between them. So let me get into the demo and show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go to the GCP dashboard. I'm going to do all of this from the dashboard just to show you how easy it is. Let's go and click create a service here. I'm going to pick on Cloud Run for Anthos. You can also go Cloud Run fully managed as well, so you don't need any sort of servers or anything running in the background. I have a Cloud Run for Anthos cluster already built, which you can see is called Backstage Pass here. The namespace that I'm going to go with will be called weather. I'm going to go to my kubectx Cloud Run and check out the namespaces here. So you can see we have Knative running in this cluster. We have this weather namespace running as well. And this weather namespace doesn't have anything right now. So we can pick on the weather namespace here, call this service weather as well. Click on next. And now we can deploy any images from our artifact registry on our image registry. So if I click on select, now check this out. I can go to artifact registry and take a look at my KF processing cluster here, right? You can see all of the images that are built by KF at your disposal, and you can deploy them anywhere. So we can take a look at weather 0 here. Let's click on this guy, select, next, and we can expose it externally. Create. Now, while this is going on, I'm going to go in and deploy a new version as well. So we can go in, same way as we did before, go to our artifact registry, take a look at all of our KF images, go to weather 1, select this guy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to serve this immediately. So I'm going to say, take all of my traffic to version 1, and then slowly when I need to, I'm going to bring traffic to version 2. I'm going to deploy this. And you can see that the first one that I deployed is green now. That's good to go. I can click on the URL here. And you can see it's the old version that I had here, right? So I can get the weather here. Now I can go back and I can split the traffic between the two versions. So I can go in here and do like a 50-50 split, or maybe let's do a 70-30 on the two so we can get a picture. And it's in a matter of seconds, you can see the traffic now is going to the other instance here. So you can see immediately I can go to that instance. And now let's just do a 50-50 just to make sure things are nice and good to go. You can go in here. And you can see we're flip-flopping between the two. So this is great for canary deployments as well. So if you have applications and workloads that are stateless and HTTP-based, Cloud Run is a great candidate for deploying those workloads. And now once I'm happy with my application and the version, what I can do is I can just do 100 to 0. And I can say that all of my traffic now needs to go to version 2, which we can go here and we can see now automatically we're always going to hit version 2 here. Let's get the weather one last time. Get weather in Fahrenheit here. So this is just a sneak peek. There's a lot more functionality coming as well because KF just got GA'd this week. There's going to be more functionalities coming around the entire ecosystem around Cloud Run as well in the future as well. But this is just to show you the glimpse of what it can do. And I think that's everything I have for you guys today.
Nice. That's awesome, Daniel. I'm very impressed with those demos, and also glad all the work we've been putting in outside of a 10-second delay of deleting a namespace that feels like a minute when you're doing a live demo. But awesome job. Really, really enjoyed that. All right. So now it's time. We're getting to another fun segment here. So we're going to bring in our friend Rohit. Hey, Rohit. How you doing, man?
Good. Kyle, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well. You
Awesome.
sound good, man. So looking forward to this chat. So
cool. My neighbor just started mowing the lawn, so please don't mind him. We'll excuse him.
That's all good. There's not too many people cutting grass up here in Canada right now. We don't have any snow on the ground, but it's a balmy day, but the grass ain't growing. Let's put it that way. Cool. Well, thanks for coming in. I wanted to bring Rohit in. Rohit's working at Google on app modernization and all good things, and obviously working really closely with customers, and has a pretty awesome career built up, and also has a lot of experience with Cloud Foundry over the years working with customers. So Rohit, maybe start out by just telling us what you're up to at Google and just some of your past experience in the ecosystem and working with customers and, more importantly, developers.
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of a unique vantage point when it comes to Cloud Foundry, because Daniyal was showing Bluemix earlier. That was my first experience with Cloud Foundry with Bluemix. Then I started working for Pivotal, obviously worked a lot with Cloud Foundry, Pivotal Web Services, and now with Google. So I've kind of seen Cloud Foundry evolve and grow up along the years. Right now, my role is to help customers with app modernization, and they have a whole bunch of workloads that run on Cloud Foundry, some run on Kubernetes. So helping them navigate their digital transformation, how best to leverage the power of Kubernetes and these modern platforms. That's kind of my charter today.
Cool. That's awesome. Then I guess you've been in the space for a while, so you clearly have seen the power of focusing on applications, because a lot of times we're kind of in this DevOps space. I look at what we do is a lot of time we're doing the glue and building all of that, but it's one thing to focus on platforms and all the work that goes into that, but there's also the concept of just pushing code. And I think back to like when I first saw Heroku and being able to use that and just start really quickly and not really think about anything behind the scenes. It just felt like someone else was running all that stuff for me. There was a lot of power in that in the learning perspective. And I saw a recent tweet I think you put out or something, and you kind of described Cloud Foundry as like a Hall of Fame technology. And I really like that, because it just goes to show, like, because I think it was like a lot of these early day things, it was a really game-changing thing for a lot of people. Like, it really moved the needle for a lot of businesses. And then when I look at the hype behind Kubernetes and the uptake and how everyone caught on to that. But talk a little bit about just Cloud Foundry in the early days before Kubernetes was such a hyped up thing, and what problems was it solving? And clearly enterprises jumped on it, because there's thousands and thousands of applications large companies are running on the platform today.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess this is where I pull my back when things were card. So like, if Cloud Foundry is a Hall of Fame technology, and some of its roots I think come from Heroku as well, because Heroku pioneered the Git push model, right? So even today, the Git push model is relevant, because with the emergence of GitOps, it feels like we have come full circle around Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. What problems did Cloud Foundry solve? Like, the number one problem that it solved was it gave developers a chance to develop something and get it deployed immediately, like in 30 seconds or 60 seconds or less. You have to understand that this was a world where, in order to stand up a website, you had to go procure a VM. That took like a month, and then after that you had to go talk to the networking guys, then you had to talk to the database guys. Cloud Foundry like flattened all that, right? Like, if you had a properly provisioned Cloud Foundry instance, you could go from 0 to code running in production in like an hour if you so desired, right? So it basically gave you the ammunition and the fuel to dramatically increase your release frequency. And when you increase your release frequency, you can iterate and release newer features for your customers and grow your business and all that. So it was an instrument for, and it still is an instrument for digital transformation, for app modernization. Some of the concepts that were introduced by Heroku and then pioneered by Cloud Foundry, like build packs, still live today, right? With cloud native build packs, Paketo build packs. Google has its own GCR build packs, right? Those things haven't gone away. I mean, that shows the strength of the paradigm when it lasts for 10, 11 years. Like, there's some good stuff cooking there.
Yeah. So I guess, but there's always a version 2 of everything, or version 3, or you forget what the numbers are when you kind of start moving around in technology, and then there becomes a lot of options for people, right? So I know in the early days of even Kubernetes, and I mean, we worked even on OpenShift before it was version 3, when they made their major pivot over to Kubernetes, and they really had a PaaS platform, and they had these I forget what engine focuses, like there was a whole different set of concept, and then everybody kind of emerged on Kubernetes. I guess there's a lot of options in this world, and sometimes we get lost on the greenfield use cases, right? We think about everyone who's developing all these cloud native functions and brand new APIs, and you've got this glorious world in front of you with no legacy code. I mean, I guess what I've seen over the years is that's a fun space to work in. We all love doing that, but as far as like what moves the needle for a business, realized business cases, like I have these apps that are making billions of dollars. Like I love the new world we're going into, but what are you going to do for my current platform? So is that really what's kind of bringing a lot of these conversations in front of you? And then how do you look at the day 2 operations part of this new paradigm? So from managing the platform as well, because as much as the developer just wants to check code in and have it happen, someone's got to turn the knobs and fix the leaky pipes behind the scenes. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting take. So the one thing in retrospect, and this is my opinion, it's not Google's opinion, or like it's just like, so don't send any hate mail my way. I think what Cloud Foundry what Kubernetes did really well is that it allowed you to break the glass and go down that level of abstraction. Case in point, it allowed you to run stateful workloads really well. Kubernetes solved the persistent volumes problem really well. Whereas Cloud Foundry, I think, was awesome for cloud native and digital native applications. But if your application didn't look a certain way, it didn't really fit in the Cloud Foundry paradigm. And which is why I feel like Kubernetes solved that problem really well. And I mean, of course, other things too, with open architecture and extensibility and all that. So that common backplane of Kubernetes is now adopted by everyone. There's a whole bunch of ecosystems going up on top of that. There's managed Kubernetes. It makes life very easy now because is a standardized set of tooling, a way to upgrade and maintain Kubernetes that goes up. That's why I feel like the BOSH oriented release chain kind of is dying, and a more Kubernetes open operator based Kubernetes based tool chain has survived and will thrive now as companies innovate on that.
Cool. Excuse me. 2 things on that. I pick up on the operator story, like, everything's going to be an operator. People are so focused on operators nowadays. It gives a vendor and the ISV community a great way to deploy consistency inside of like Kubernetes. And that also means like Kubernetes anywhere. I don't really, they shouldn't care if it's Kubernetes on GCP, another cloud provider, on-prem, whatever. So this opinionated operator kind of mantra that allows you to kind of have prescription, allows you to deal with persistence, because, we're well beyond the stateless applications. Again, I think the business needs stateful apps. We need to be able to do all these things. And the early days of Cloud Run, I think a lot of people looked at it as run stateless apps. That's where you run your stateless apps. And I think it was, we had Kelsey Hightower on one of these first ones, and I asked them the questions around, and I made a comment around Cloud Foundry and stateless apps. And Kelsey quickly interrupted me, and he said, I want to pick up on that conversation. So his point was, there's going to be stateless parts that run in Cloud Run, but applications need persistence, and being able to reach back into cloud services and other services to provide that persistence, but not tie it to the front end, I thought was a really good point, because I think I caught myself saying, Cloud Run, stateless apps, put it there. But it's really just a front end kind of gateway to where you write your persistence, or where you go grab a file for an integration, or where you reach out to another Google service. So, and I know what I learned about Cloud Foundry, they really did a good job with the service broker. And that became a killer tool for the developer. Also was being able to say, I need a database, putting that in the spec, and then boom, you got a Postgres database and you were off to the races too. So what did that, that must have been, was that an early thing that came in, or was it there from the start? Like, to me, that's a killer feature. And I think my next question will build on that.
Yeah, I think the service brokers landed pretty early. Like the whole provisioning of a service instance and binding it to the app, I think took time to bake. And then I think towards the later phases, they created an async provisioning of those services. But really, the power was that you can create this service instance to CF create service. And then when you bind it, these environment variables show up in your application environment. And then you basically configure your application to read those environment variables, or configure beans to leverage that. It basically gave you independence in that if that Postgres, if that broker existed in other environments that you ran, your app could basically port from one Cloud Foundry instance to another Cloud Foundry instance. So the whole OSB API, I think that evolved into OSB API. The service broker concept is very well baked and allows portability of applications in the Cloud Foundry land.
Right. And I guess when I started peeling the onion of this, and our customers are a lot of big enterprise customers that you don't get, there's not a version 1 of like, we'll make it better. We'll add HA, we'll add BCP later. Like, these are things you need out of the gate. So one of the things I know we want to build on is, when we migrate these things and they are back-ended by a certain database, we're moving these things into cloud. So I think there's a huge opportunity around decoupling the data set from things like Postgres and MySQL, because a lot of times these are single instances running on a platform. So I think there's 2 angles there. Like, how do we provide very highly available services? And maybe that is the operator concept, because it's very opinionated and we can deal with stateful sets and things. But I think where this is going to go is, when someone puts equals I need state, for example, to dumb it down, why not be able to spin up a Cloud SQL instance and be able to plumb all those parts and all the access and identity and networking? And then that should be abstracted from the developer also. They're not wrangling Terraform and a lot of these abstraction tools. So do you think that's where this is going to go? Because I see it as just a great way to be the old switchboard person who answered the phone and kind of plugged everything in behind the scenes to get the call there. Do you think we're going to get there?
Data is hard, Kyle. And my data migration is hard. As long as like the developers don't have to really change and refactor their applications, and they kind of get the same interface that they had with Postgres, they see the same dialects in the application. The data gets migrated from, say, Postgres to whatever Cloud SQL. I think if that transition is seamless, then it will catch on and people will start using it. If it means that folks have to change their applications and they have to rewire their applications for Cloud SQL or for some other persistence, then it becomes difficult. So I guess the point being that it has to be frictionless. I think it is going there with managed services. And once we create pipelines and facilitate that, it will be easier to move apps not only to KF, but also then to Cloud Run and other clouds as well that have that Kubernetes plane.
So we all know change is hard, right? No matter, it's not tech, it's everything in life is kind of is hard just because it is. I think we're all comfortable with that reality. What do you think are going to be the hardest parts? And obviously, like, remove the part that it's just we have to change. But what parts do we need to kind of double down on? What parts do people like Arctiq and other partners that provide, these consulting services to help you get to the finish line? Where do you think the focus needs to be?
Yeah, there are a lot of applications and workloads, and some of them are on VMs, Some of them are on like on various deployment targets. I think where someone where a partner or a vendor like Arctiq helps is to kind of be a true partner and help customers on that journey, be it a GitOps journey or a migration journey from Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes. Um, Creating that factory and helping helping customers kind of use your superpowers to accelerate their path wherever that is. I think KF is a good bridge tool, a tool that kind of creates that ramp to higher level constructs. Like the stuff that Daniyal showed today was pretty powerful. The two things that I want to bring about is you showed Cloud Run, the artifacts were stored and then we could use Cloud Run. You could even scale to 0. So in effect, you have basically taken a Cloud Foundry application and have now made it serverless on Anthos because it can scale to 0. So I think that was pretty powerful. The second thing that I see is that KF supports both V2 version 2 build packs, version 3 build packs. So basically, it's very secular in the kind it accepts all kinds of applications. It's conformant to the Cloud Found controller V2 and V3 APIs. So it's if enterprises are looking at going to Kubernetes and want a thin layer and need to accelerate that automation, I think KF and what you showed today in terms of turn, I think is a very powerful solution.
Cool. Yeah, I saw a question in here. Was around CF auto scaling is one of the key features. Are there such things? And I think, if you look at Cloud Run, the ability to scale to 0 is one killer feature, but the ability to auto scale up for events and deal with like burstable things and then scale that back down. And then a lot of times people will bring up like the cold start issue. And that was one of the things I heard early, but you can also configure like never go below 1 pod. So they're always there to respond. And then you can scale up from those events. So I think people are always trying to, when you start looking at new tech, you start thinking, is it a replacement? And one of the things I like that the approach with KF has been, we're not trying to replace anything. Like all of this stuff has worked really well. There's a strong community behind it. We're trying to enhance and make the on-ramp easier and make migrations easier and not make it this big risky event for a business. I mean, having to rewrite code and test it and deploy it in a new platform is one thing, but just the code changes and validating it integrates with all the third-party stuff is a pretty monumental effort for people. And you have to attach cost to that because people have to test it. You have to sign off on things. So I like the approach of it's really, I look at it as an on-ramp tool. Like that's why we kind of coined it into the migration space, right? Like it's not so much you could call it a lift and shift, but we're really not dealing with infrastructure at all. We're just dealing with the code.
Yeah, I think another cool thing is like you're not just like those pipelines that were shown are not just for existing apps, but they can also be. We also showed a path for continuous deployment of the application. It's not that the application has stopped development and it's just like we're just moving it over. The pipelines are for both, for like taking it and also actively developing on it from future. So it gives you both, gives you that ramp, and it also gives you a full modern GitOps pipeline to evolve it as well.
Yeah, I mean, when Daniyal first showed me the work that he had done, it was working, right? So it was like, boom, we migrated, we got it up. And then my first question was, okay, how do I make a code change and change the color or something simple, right? But what's my developer experience now when a security vulnerability comes in, or we need to put a new ad in, or the company gets acquired and we need to change the logo, like something even as simple as that. Is that a painful experience? And I think when people talk migrations, they're always afraid of, okay, you picked one thing up, moved it. I did want to modernize it. Maybe I didn't have time, but I still better be able to make changes to it. And it better be a fairly nice experience. Ideally, if I'm a customer, I don't want equivalent experience. I want a little bit better. I want better experience every time I do something.
And we tailor it to the customer too, Kyle. We work with so many customers, like not one pipeline works for everyone. So I think what it is it's like a seed pipeline to think about. We can adopt, like tailor it, customize it based on what your enterprise needs are. Hey, if you use Jenkins X, we can do this in Jenkins X. We do what makes sense in the customer's environment.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And Daniyal, maybe you want to play on that. Is I heard you talk a lot about building blocks, right? And the reality is you've seen us use like Tecton and a lot of these open source tools and what we're doing so that the customer has a quick on-ramp to a toolkit. They don't have to go procure software and start another contract with someone. But the reality is we have customers that have all kinds of different tools that they want to keep. So Daniyal, what's your take on just the building block concept that I've heard you talk about?
Yeah, so I think when you're migrating platforms, I think this is a great opportunity to just modernize your software delivery stack as well, right? And what I'm talking to customers a lot nowadays is just take apart your CI and your CD altogether, right? Think about CI as like a different platform and then CD as like a different workflow. That just helps make life easy for dev and ops both, right? So just have your CI fully automated and then have guardrails in place for your deployment and pieces and things like that. And now some of the pieces that I showed in the demo, all of them can be, as long as we have an API, we can essentially just replace it with anything. Right now we're using, GitHub, we can bring in Bitbucket, GitLab, whatever we want. So as long as we have an API, this workflow should function.
Yeah, I guess when we should add a slide to when we're meeting with customers, but before the question or after the question slide, the answer is as long as you have an API, the equals yes, right? I mean,
yeah,
we take that for granted sometimes, right? Like not every system has an API and there's ways to deal with it. I mean, even looking at some of that workflow stuff you were showing around merging and approvals, I start to think of plugging in like ServiceNow into some of these customers. They have an API. Why can't you? Don't have my point around not having to change the release process, not necessarily have to change the approval process either. If you can call out, get an approval, call back in, that becomes the merge. Possibilities are kind of endless to fit into existing business processes.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. So go ahead.
One more question that I had for Rohit, maybe. Do you want to talk about what your opinion is on, how to going from Bosch to something like Kubernetes? How does an operator's life change? Like, is it, I know Bosch from like a really high level perspective. Maybe you want to drill down a little bit and talk about that.
I mean, I spent 6 years at, just being honest, like I spent 6 years at Pivotal / VMware. I still couldn't figure out Bosch. I mean, I'm not smart enough for that tech. I think Kubernetes is far simpler. I think it does less, and it has more standardized APIs. In terms of an operator experience, I can talk about Anthos, and GKE. We have release channels, and so upgrading that base level of Kubernetes and GKE is very easy. Whereas, upgrading Cloud Foundry is not trivial. Is not depending on the complexity. Overall, I think apples to apples, that there's complexity on both sides, but the experience here is much more standardized, and the tooling ecosystem, because remember Bosch was like the ecosystem and tooling around Kubernetes is massive. The managed services, managing Kubernetes is getting easier. Operator experience is simpler, and I would contend easier because of that. If you see like the number of components that Bosch lays down for a full Cloud Foundry install, that's why we added like small footprint Cloud Foundry and so on. The operational experience is easier with less moving parts.
Yeah, don't treat your clusters as pets, right? That's what we always say.
Yeah, I mean it was good. It was good technology. In fact, Bosch came from Google, I think from Borg, but I feel like that was the biggest operational pain, honestly speaking, of Cloud Foundry, is that it was just too difficult to maintain on the operator side. That was part of the reasons why the developers loved it. The operators were like, okay, we'll deal with it. But with KF, you get the best of both worlds. You get the developer experience, and then you get the Kubernetes backend where like all of the cloud vendors are innovating on that, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is like we've all become used to this ever-evolving software space, right? So what excites me is we've got a bunch of good prototypes. We figured out a bunch of use cases, but I want to get working with some of our customers that have like built a lot of IP in their space over the years. And we may not have an answer for every one of them, but I know we got the brain power and the partnership with Google to figure it out. And then as we nail these use cases, it becomes a pattern for others. So it just goes along with everything that's moved the needle as far as like cloud native forward. It's solving, real problems, and then we benefit from those and move on to the next one. And not encouraging you to be a late adopter, so you get the advantage of all the problems being solved. But you got to find what part of that you're comfortable with. So last question, Rohit, is maybe what's your take on this? When we talk about Anthos, it's all about like hybrid and multi-cloud and managing, other people's Kubernetes distributions and just meeting the customer where they are and providing that flexibility. How do you see this KF tool, and I guess it's a natural advantage you get by bringing it into like an Anthos or GK environment. Do you think that's a problem that people are going to have an advantage from, or do you really think they just need one place to deploy their stuff? And
Yeah, I mean, multi-cloud is real, Kyle. I mean, for a variety of reasons, regulatory reasons. You may not want to just from a high availability disaster recovery perspective, from especially in retail, right? Like there's genuine concerns about the cloud providers being conflict of interest. It just overall makes sense to keep optionality with multiple clouds and leverage the best that they have to offer. So now if you have to be operating in multiple clouds and you have a massive data center which you have already invested in and you want to leverage the most out of, you want a platform that can provide you that consistent operational experience, developer experience at scale, which is why Anthos, which provides that platform, are successful. Now KF builds on top of that, right? KF builds on top of the Kubernetes API and and in some respects the Cloud Controller API. So Kubernetes is the platform that allows you to build these higher level experiences and developer products on top of Kubernetes. And being multi-cloud allows you to keep the same Kubernetes backplane and operational experience across clouds. I think this trend is here to stay. And what I foresee will happen is enterprises will become really smart about how they are leveraging their existing data center footprint. They will optimize it, and they will start leveraging higher end features like bursting, and be very strategic about how they move workloads along. Something like KF and a platform like Anthos enables that workload mobility across clouds all the way to the edge.
Cool. So to end things, what are you jazzed up about, excited to be working on? We're coming up on the end of the year here, finish off your year, and then what moves into next year? What are you most excited about? What's making you jump out of bed? Work-wise, anyway.
Work-wise. Is just the like some folks say that if you see today, the e-commerce penetration in the US market is still under 25%. COVID has accelerated it. So the opportunity to help our customers with modernization and digital transformation, nearly 75% of the consumer market is still needs digital transformation and modernization, and that's just in the consumer space. There's the B2B space. So all this points to, we still, like as an industry, for across Google and all other companies, we still have a lot to do as a group to kind of increase productivity of our enterprises and get them on this journey and become truly digitally native. So I'm excited at that opportunity, not just for Google, but for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's a good community message, right? Like we're all in this together. Obviously, we all work for different people and want to advocate, but a lot of this stuff comes out of the community and the hard work that goes on there, and then it gets productized. So thanks for coming, man. I really appreciate it. I see we got a few people left on, so I'm going to, I want to give away one of these new shirts we have with the, you'll be able to see it's the conference or the dreaded conference call shirt and a hat. So shoot us a tweet at Arctiq, maybe just hashtag Backstage Pass, and we'll pick a few people, or we'll do a couple random draws and send you out a shirt and a hat for the holiday season. So that's your challenge for people that are left. Thanks for sticking around. I guess the only other plug that I'll do is we started this new podcast. We've been having a lot of fun with it. Dive Bar DevOps. We got an awesome bartender, Dave, who's curious about everything and wants to learn. So we got about 5 episodes up there now and a lot of new ones coming up. So we're really looking forward to that piece, and we've got a bunch more scheduled over the holidays. But thanks everybody for coming. And yeah, keep an eye out. We're gonna keep pushing the envelope. We're gonna do more stuff. We love this format. We've been getting great feedback from it. And obviously, if you're interested in KF and you want to give it a try, just hit up our website and send us a ping through intercom or an email, tweet, whatever means you do to communicate to people. We'd love to have a chat about use cases and make sure we pick the right first couple that are gonna move the needle for you. But yeah, we'll let everybody get on with their day, and really appreciate you joining. Micah had to drop, but he did an awesome demo, and Daniyal, get back to work, I guess. You said you had a bunch of new ideas, so. But really good job, Daniyal. Like, nailed the demos. The demo gods were good to us today, so we thank them very much. And we'll see you again at the next Backstage event. I think there's one coming up on API management, Apogee API management, pretty soon. And then obviously we've got our regular meetups, Ansible meetups, and HashiCorp stuff that we do in the community side. So everybody enjoy the day, and we will get this back up for anyone who missed it. You can share it with your friends and family, or if you want to just watch the demo again, you'll be able to do that. So keep an eye out for our YouTube channel and subscribe to that, and you'll get lots of good content. So that's it. We're 3 minutes over. We're actually getting pretty good at this thing, so love it. All right, everybody enjoy the rest of their day. Take it easy.